The fluorescent lights of Chicago's downtown family court hummed with the particular frequency of institutional indifference. Marcus Chen sat on the hard wooden bench outside courtroom 7B, his calloused fingers worrying the frayed edge of his work shirt. The fabric had given up its fight against repeated washings months ago, much like Marcus had given up trying to make his life look more presentable than it actually was. Beside him, in a folder held together with duct tape and hope, were documents that represented his entire life. Pay stubs from Joe's auto repair where he worked the early shift, 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. More pay stubs from his evening job at Murphy's Grocery, stocking shelves from 4 p.m. to midnight. Bank statements showing an account that never quite reached 4 digits before rent was due. And photographs, dozens of them, of a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile who made every impossible day worth living. Emma, his 7-year-old daughter. His entire world compressed into 53 pounds of energy, curiosity, and unconditional love. Chen versus Chen, courtroom 7B, 10 minutes, called the bailiff. A woman whose voice suggested she'd made this announcement 10,000 times before and would make it 10,000 times more. Marcus's stomach dropped. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, a judge he'd never met would decide whether he was fit to keep custody of his daughter. In 10 minutes, his ex-wife Victoria's expensive lawyers would argue that Emma deserved better than a father who worked 2 jobs, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that made concerned teachers lower their voices, and couldn't afford the private tutors and dance classes that Victoria now provided in her new life with her wealthy husband. The thing that killed Marcus wasn't that Victoria was wrong. Emma did deserve better. She deserved a father who could pick her up from school instead of relying on Mrs. Patterson next door. She deserved birthday parties at places with ball pits and pizza, not homemade cupcakes in their tiny living room. She deserved a father who didn't fall asleep during bedtime stories because he'd been awake for 18 hours straight. But Emma also deserved a father who loved her more than oxygen. And Marcus did. God, he did. Daddy always says love is the most important ingredient, Emma had told her kindergarten teacher last year when asked about her favorite meal. That's why his scrambled eggs taste better than restaurant eggs. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. The courtroom corridor smelled like floor wax and recycled air and the particular desperation of people fighting legal battles they couldn't afford to lose. His phone buzzed. A text from his boss at the auto shop. Need you Saturday. Double shift. Big job came in. Saturday. The one full day he had with Emma every week. The day they went to the free museum or the park, or just stayed home building blanket forts and watching nature documentaries because Emma was obsessed with sea turtles. Marcus typed back, "Can't have Emma." The reply came instantly, "Your choice, but we need the help." It was always his choice. Work and provide or spend time and risk losing everything. The impossible mathematics of poverty where every decision cost more than you had to give. Mr. Chen. A young woman in a crisp suit approached, clipboard in hand. She was Victoria's new lawyer, the third one in 6 months. Apparently when you married money, you could afford to shop for legal representation until you found someone willing to argue that a father's love was irrelevant compared to a trust fund. Yes. Marcus stood, instinctively straightening his shirt even though he knew it wouldn't help. My client wanted me to inform you that she's willing to offer generous visitation rights. Every other weekend, plus holidays. She thinks that would be best for Emma's stability. Every other weekend, for days a month. 96 hours out of 720. The mathematical reduction of fatherhood to a percentage that wouldn't even pass a school test. Emma's stable with me, Marcus said quietly. She's happy. Her teachers say she's thriving. The lawyer's smile was professional and pitying in equal measure. Mr. Chen, Emma is 7 years old. She needs structure, opportunities, resources. My client can provide private education, extracurricular activities, a savings account for college. Can you honestly say you can offer the same? The answer was no. Of course it was no. Marcus could offer love and presence and scrambled eggs made with the most important ingredient, but he couldn't offer violin lessons or SAT prep courses or anything else that came with a price tag he couldn't afford. "I can offer her father," Marcus said instead. "Of course, and you'll still be her father. Just perhaps not her primary guardian." The lawyer walked away, her heels clicking efficiently against the linoleum. Marcus sank back onto the bench, his hands shaking. This was it. This was how he lost everything that mattered. The elevator dinged at the end of the hallway. Marcus barely noticed, too consumed by the dread pooling in his stomach. But then he heard it. Commotion. Raised voices with the particular urgency that cut through institutional background noise. "Please, someone help. My car died in the parking garage and I have to be in court in 5 minutes. I'm the judge for the 10 o'clock cases. Can't be late. I can't." Marcus's head snapped up. A woman stood by the elevator, immaculately dressed in a black suit and white blouse, her dark hair pulled into a professional bun. She was holding a briefcase in one hand and her phone in the other, her expression somewhere between panic and fury. "The towing company says 45 minutes minimum," she continued, addressing anyone and everyone. "I need to get to courtroom 7B. Does anyone?" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes landing on Marcus. More specifically, on the automotive supply store logo embroidered on his work shirt. "You. Do you know anything about cars?" Marcus stood slowly, his tired brain processing the information. "The judge. For the 10 o'clock cases. His case started at 10:15. "I'm a mechanic," he heard himself say. "Can you help me?" The desperation in her voice was raw and real. "Please. I have families depending on me being in that courtroom. Important cases. Life-changing decisions." Marcus looked at the clock on the wall. 9:52 a.m. He looked at courtroom 7B, where his own life-changing decision was about to be made. He looked at the woman, this stranger, this judge, who had no idea she was asking him to choose between helping her and saving himself. The smart thing would be to say no, to explain he had his own case, his own crisis, his own desperate need to be in that courtroom when his name was called. The smart thing would be to protect himself first. But Marcus had never been good at choosing the smart thing over the right thing. It was probably why he was here in the first place. A man too foolish to leave a job he loved for one that paid better. Too stubborn to give up custody even when everyone said it would be easier on Emma to just let her go. "Where's your car?" Marcus asked. The relief that flooded the woman's face was profound. "Level 2 of the parking garage. Silver BMW. It just died." Everything went dark. Could be the battery. Could be the alternator. Could be a dozen things. Marcus was already moving toward the elevator, his folder of documents still clutched in his hand. "Whatever it is, can you fix it? Fast." "I can try." They rode the elevator in silence. Marcus could feel the weight of every second passing, every moment bringing him closer to missing his own hearing. But his hands were steady as they descended into the parking garage, steady in the way they always were when he was working on something mechanical, something he understood. The BMW was exactly where she said it would be, looking expensive even in the dim garage lighting. Marcus popped the hood, his practiced eye immediately scanning for obvious problems. "What's your name?" the woman asked, hovering beside him with barely contained anxiety. "Marcus Chen. I'm Judge Sarah Mitchell, and I genuinely cannot thank you enough for this. I have 3 custody cases this morning, and these families have been waiting months for their hearings." Marcus's hands stilled for just a moment over the engine. "Custody cases. Of course. Battery connections are corroded," he said instead of responding, reaching for the multi-tool he always kept in his pocket. "That's your problem. I can clean them. Should get you started, but you'll need to replace the battery soon. Whatever you need to do, please." Marcus worked quickly, his fingers remembering motions he'd performed 1,000 times before. Scrape away the corrosion, tighten the connections, check the voltage. The familiar rhythm of repair, of taking something broken and making it functional again. You're very calm, Judge Mitchell observed, watching him work. Most people would be more nervous around a judge. Most people aren't used to things breaking down, Marcus replied without looking up. When you're poor, everything breaks. You get good at staying calm while you fix it. He hadn't meant to say that, hadn't meant to reveal anything personal. But exhaustion had stripped away his filters, leaving only honesty. Try starting it now, he instructed. Judge Mitchell slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine turned over immediately, purring to life like it had never failed. Her face transformed with relief. Oh, thank God. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. I don't know what I would have done. She grabbed her briefcase from the passenger seat, already moving toward the garage exit. Can I pay you? For your time and expertise. No need, Marcus said, closing the hood. Just helping out. At least let me get your contact information, in case I need a reliable mechanic. She pulled out her phone, waiting expectantly. Marcus recited his number mechanically, his eyes on his watch. 10:08 a.m. 7 minutes until his hearing. If he ran, if the elevator came immediately, if he didn't stop for anything, he might make it. Thank you again, Mr. Chen. You're a lifesaver. Literally. Judge Mitchell hurried toward her car, then paused, turning back. You said you're used to things breaking down, used to being poor. Can I ask, what brings you to the courthouse today? Marcus hesitated. The truth sat heavy on his tongue. But what did it matter now? He'd already sacrificed his chance. Custody hearing, he said simply. Fighting to keep my daughter. Something in Judge Mitchell's expression shifted, softened. Then you should go. Right now. Don't miss it. It's okay. These things take time anyway. You said families are waiting. That's more important. Mr. Chen. Really? It's fine. I chose to help. I'll deal with whatever happens. He turned toward the elevator before she could argue, before his resolve could weaken. The ride up felt longer than the ride down, every floor a reminder of time slipping away. When the doors opened on the courthouse level, Marcus could hear the bailiff's voice echoing down the corridor. Chen versus Chen, Courtroom 7B. Final call for Marcus Chen. Marcus ran. His worn sneakers slapped against the linoleum as he sprinted down the hallway, his folder flapping in his hand. He burst through the courtroom doors at 10:17 a.m., breathless and disheveled, to find Victoria and her lawyer already seated at their table, looking composed and ready. Mr. Chen, said a familiar voice. So glad you could join us. Marcus's head snapped toward the bench. Judge Sarah Mitchell sat in her robes, her expression professionally neutral, but something flickered in her eyes when they met his. Recognition. Understanding. My apologies for the delay, Your Honor, Marcus managed, moving to his seat. I was helping someone with car trouble. So I heard, Judge Mitchell said dryly. Let's begin. The next hour passed in a blur of testimony and arguments. Victoria's lawyer painted a picture of Marcus as a well-meaning but inadequate father. A man who worked too much, earned too little, couldn't provide the advantages a child deserved. They brought up the one-bedroom apartment, the neighborhood crime statistics, the fact that Emma's school was rated 6 out of 10 on some website that apparently mattered. Mr. Chen clearly loves his daughter, the lawyer concluded. But love alone isn't enough. Emma needs stability, resources, opportunities. My client can provide all of that and more. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he stood slowly, his prepared statement forgotten. Instead, he looked at Judge Mitchell and told the truth. Your Honor, everything they've said is accurate. I do work 2 jobs. I do live in a small apartment in a neighborhood that's not great. I can't afford private tutors or dance classes or most of the things Victoria can give Emma now. He swallowed hard. But I can tell you that every morning, I wake Emma up by singing to her. Badly. She tells me I sound like a dying walrus. But she laughs every time. I can tell you that she's memorized 17 facts about sea turtles because I checked out every book our library had on the subject. I can tell you that when she has nightmares, she knows I'm always there, every single night, in the next room. Marcus's voice cracked. I can tell you that this morning, I had a choice. I could come straight to this hearing, protect myself, make sure I didn't miss my chance. Or I could help someone who needed it, even if it cost me everything. I chose to help because that's what I want Emma to learn. That we help people. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs us. Especially then. He sat down, exhausted and empty. He'd given everything he had to give. It wouldn't be enough. It was never enough when you were fighting against money and power and the way the world valued things he couldn't provide. Judge Mitchell was silent for a long moment, her fingers steepled under her chin. When she finally spoke, her voice carried through the courtroom with quiet authority. I've been a family court judge for 12 years. In that time, I've heard hundreds of custody cases. I've seen every variation of family dysfunction, every type of parental failure and success. I've learned that wealth does not equal worthiness, and poverty does not equal inadequacy. She looked directly at Marcus. This morning, Mr. Chen had an important hearing. A hearing that would determine his entire future relationship with his child. And yet, when a stranger asked for help, he didn't hesitate. He sacrificed his own critical deadline to assist someone in need. Victoria's lawyer started to object, but Judge Mitchell held up her hand. That stranger was me. Mr. Chen had no idea I was the judge who would hear his case. He helped me because it was the right thing to do. Because that's who he is. She turned to Victoria. Mrs. Anderson, you can provide your daughter with material advantages that Mr. Chen cannot match. But can you provide her with a father who models integrity, selflessness, and genuine compassion? Can you teach her that people matter more than possessions? That helping others is more important than protecting yourself. Judge Mitchell's gaze swept the courtroom. The law requires me to consider the best interests of the child. Emma's best interest is to have a father who loves her unconditionally and teaches her, through his daily actions, how to be a good human being. Full custody remains with Mr. Chen. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder and salvation. Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't process, couldn't believe what had just happened. He'd lost. He'd been certain he'd lost. And yet, however, Judge Mitchell continued, her voice firm, Mr. Chen, you will accept the following conditions. 1. You will reduce your work hours at your second job. I'm ordering Ms. Anderson to pay child support that will make this financially possible. 2. You will accept assistance from the court's Family Services program to find suitable childcare for Emma during your working hours. 3. You will attend co-parenting counseling with Ms. Anderson to ensure Emma maintains a healthy relationship with both parents. She looked at Victoria, whose face had gone pale. Ms. Anderson, you will have generous visitation rights. Every other weekend, plus holidays, plus additional time during summer vacation. But you will use that time to build a relationship with your daughter, not to compete with her father or attempt to prove that money equals love. The gavel came down again. We're adjourned. Marcus sat frozen as the courtroom emptied around him. Victoria left quickly, her lawyer muttering about appeals. Other cases were called, other families filed in and out. But Marcus remained seated, tears streaming down his face, his hands shaking with the release of fear he'd carried for months. Mr. Chen, Judge Mitchell's voice was gentle. A moment in my chambers? He followed her numbly into a small office behind the courtroom. She closed the door and removed her robes, looking suddenly more human, more like the panicked woman in the parking garage than the powerful judge on the bench. I should thank you again, she said, for the car, for showing up late because you were helping me, for being exactly the kind of person your daughter needs you to be. You didn't have to rule that way, Marcus managed. I know how these things usually go. I ruled based on the evidence presented. The evidence showed me a father who works himself to exhaustion for his child. who sacrifices his own needs to help strangers, who teaches through example rather than lectures. She smiled sadly. I see a lot of parents in this courtroom, Mr. Chen. Most of them talk about love. You demonstrated it. I just did what anyone would do. No. Most people would have ignored me, would have prioritized their own hearing. You didn't. She pulled a card from her desk drawer. This is the contact information for a friend of mine who runs a nonprofit. They help working parents find assistance with childcare, job training, emergency funds. I want you to call them. Pride is admirable, but accepting help isn't weakness. Marcus took the card, his fingers numb. I don't know what to say. Say you'll pick up your daughter from school today and tell her about your victory. Say you'll let people help you sometimes. Say you'll keep being exactly who you are. Judge Mitchell extended her hand. It was an honor to meet you, Mr. Chen, both in the parking garage and in my courtroom. They shook hands, and Marcus left the courthouse in a daze. The November sun was painfully bright after the fluorescent-lit interior. He pulled out his phone and called the one person he needed to hear from. Daddy! Emma's voice was pure joy. Are you done with your meeting? Mrs. Patterson said it's not a meeting really, it's important adult stuff, but she wouldn't tell me what. Did something happen? When are you picking me up? Baby girl, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Pack your overnight bag. We're having a celebration sleepover tonight. Just you and me. Pizza and ice cream and that sea turtle documentary you've been wanting to watch. But Daddy, it's Tuesday. We do celebrations on Saturdays. We're making new rules. We celebrate every good thing the moment it happens. And today something really, really good happened. What? I'll tell you when I pick you up. I love you, Emma. More than all the sea turtles in all the oceans. She giggled. That's a lot of sea turtles, Daddy. That's how much. Marcus hung up and stood on the courthouse steps, letting the reality sink in. He'd kept his daughter. He'd kept his family. Not because he was rich or powerful or impressive, but because he'd chosen to help someone who needed it. Sometimes the universe rewarded kindness in unexpected ways. Sometimes judges had car trouble in parking garages. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing turned out to be the same thing after all. Marcus walked to the bus stop, his step lighter than it had been in months. He had a daughter to pick up, a celebration to plan, and a future that suddenly looked brighter than it had any right to be. 2 months later, Marcus's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He answered it while stirring eggs for Emma's breakfast, the phone tucked between his shoulder and ear. Mr. Chen? This is David Park from Park's Automotive. Judge Mitchell gave me your number. Said you helped her out of a jam and that you're a skilled mechanic looking for better opportunities. Marcus stopped stirring. Sir, I'm opening a new location on the north side. Need a head mechanic. Better hours, better pay, full benefits. Judge Mitchell spoke very highly of your character and skill. Any interest in an interview? Yes. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good. Can you come by Friday at 2 p.m.? I know that's short notice. I'll be there. Marcus hung up and looked at Emma, who was watching him with curious eyes. Daddy, why are you crying? Happy tears, baby girl. Sometimes good things keep happening after the first good thing. Like dominoes, but in reverse. That doesn't make sense, Daddy. I know, but it's true anyway. The job at Park's Automotive was everything Marcus hadn't dared to hope for. Reasonable hours, a salary that meant he could quit his second job, health insurance that actually covered things. For the first time since Victoria had left, Marcus felt like he could breathe. But more than that, he could be present for Emma. He picked her up from school now every day. They did homework together at their tiny kitchen table. They cooked dinner, made blanket forts, watched documentaries about sea turtles and elephants and coral reefs. They were building a life, piece by piece, in that small one-bedroom apartment that was starting to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like home. 6 months after the hearing, Marcus received an invitation to speak at a family law conference about the importance of character in custody evaluations. Judge Mitchell had recommended him. He almost declined. Public speaking terrified him, and what did he have to say that lawyers and judges didn't already know? But Emma convinced him. "Daddy, you always tell me to be brave even when I'm scared. You should be brave too." So Marcus stood on a stage in front of 200 legal professionals and told his story. About poverty and pride, about working 2 jobs and still not having enough, about the morning he chose to help a stranger instead of protecting himself, about how that choice had saved his family. "The system often equates resources with capability," he concluded. "But children don't need wealthy parents. They need present parents. Parents who show up, who sacrifice, who teach by example. I'm not special. I'm just a dad trying his best with what he has. But somehow that was enough. And I think it should be enough more often than it is." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people wanted to talk to him, to share their own stories, to thank him for putting into words what they'd felt but couldn't articulate. Judge Mitchell approached him at the end, her smile warm. "You're a natural speaker, Mr. Chen." "I'm a terrified mechanic who almost threw up backstage," Marcus corrected. "Even better. Authentic fear makes authentic courage more powerful." She hesitated. "I wanted you to know that your case changed how I evaluate custody disputes. I'm looking for character now, not just capability. You taught me that." "You saved my family," Marcus said simply. "I think we're even. Not even close. You saved me first. Remember?" Marcus drove home that evening thinking about chain reactions, about how helping one person had led to keeping his daughter, which led to a better job, which led to this moment, about how kindness multiplied in ways you couldn't predict or plan. Emma was waiting when he got home, bouncing with excitement. "Daddy, Mrs. Patterson and I made cookies." "Well, I made cookies." Mrs. Patterson supervised because last time I made cookies by myself we had to open all the windows. "I remember. The apartment smelled like burned chocolate for a week." "These ones are better. Try one." Marcus bit into a slightly misshapen but surprisingly delicious cookie. "These are amazing, baby girl." "I know. I followed the recipe exactly this time instead of adding extra stuff. Sometimes more isn't better. Sometimes enough is perfect." Marcus looked at his 7-year-old daughter, wise beyond her years, and felt his heart swell. "You're absolutely right. Sometimes enough is perfect." That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus sat at his kitchen table and wrote a thank you note to Judge Mitchell. Not because he needed to, but because he wanted her to know that her ruling hadn't just saved his custody rights. It had saved his life, his purpose, his reason for being. "You saw something in me that day," he wrote. "Something I wasn't sure was there anymore. You saw a father worth keeping. Thank you for looking past the poverty to the person. Thank you for understanding that love is the most important ingredient, even when it's the only ingredient we can afford. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove that enough can be perfect." He mailed the letter the next morning. Judge Mitchell called him a week later, her voice thick with emotion. "Your letter meant more to me than you know. I've had a hard week, difficult cases where there are no good answers. Your words reminded me why I do this job. Thank you. Thank you for doing it," Marcus replied. "For caring about character as much as capability. For seeing families like mine as worth saving." They talked for an hour about justice and compassion, about the ways the system failed people and the ways individuals could make it better. It was the beginning of a friendship that would last years, built on mutual respect and the memory of a morning when car trouble and custody hearings collided in the most unexpected way. Years passed. Emma grew from 7 to 17, from elementary school to the edge of college. She was brilliant, passionate, determined to study marine biology, so she could help save those sea turtles she'd loved since childhood. She'd been accepted to 3 universities, each one offering significant financial aid. "Daddy," she said one evening during her senior year, "I've been thinking about that day, the custody hearing, the day that changed everything." "What about it?" You almost lost me because you stopped to help Judge Mitchell. You were late to court, risked everything, just to fix a stranger's car. I did. That was really stupid, Daddy. Marcus laughed. Probably. But it was also the most you thing you've ever done. You taught me that day that people matter more than outcomes. That doing the right thing is worth the risk. She hugged him tightly. Thank you for being stupid in the best possible way. Anytime, baby girl. If stories like this still mean something to you, don't just scroll. Subscribe and stay for the next one. On Emma's graduation day, Judge Mitchell was in the audience. She'd stayed in touch over the years, watching Emma grow through Marcus's proud updates and occasional visits. When Emma crossed the stage to receive her diploma, Judge Mitchell stood and applauded along with everyone else. At the celebration dinner afterward, Emma stood to give a speech. I want to thank my dad, she began, her voice steady and strong. 10 years ago, he made a choice that could have cost him everything. He chose kindness over self-preservation. He chose to help someone who needed it, even when he was the one who needed help most. That choice saved our family. More than that, it taught me who I want to be. She looked at Marcus, tears shining in her eyes. Daddy, you showed me that integrity matters. That character counts. That love really is the most important ingredient, even when it's the only ingredient we have. I'm going to college because of you. I'm studying marine biology because you taught me to care about things bigger than myself. I'm the person I am because you're the person you are. Marcus couldn't speak, could only stand and hug his daughter while she cried into his shoulder and whispered, Thank you for keeping me. Thank you for being my dad. Judge Mitchell approached them afterward, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Emma, you're remarkable. Marcus, you've raised a remarkable daughter. He really has, Emma agreed. And you helped make it possible. Thank you, Judge Mitchell. Thank you for seeing who my dad really was when everyone else just saw what he didn't have. I saw a man fix my car when he had every reason to refuse. The rest was obvious. Not obvious to everyone, Marcus said quietly. But I'm glad it was obvious to you. As the celebration wound down and guests departed, Marcus stood with Emma on their apartment balcony, looking out over the city lights. The same apartment they'd lived in for 10 years, though he could afford to move now. But Emma had asked to stay. It's home, Daddy. It's where we built our life. Why would we leave? You're going to do amazing things, Marcus said. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you too, Daddy. You worked 2 jobs to keep me. You sacrificed everything to give me a life. You showed me every single day what real love looks like. I'd do it all again. I know. That's what makes you my hero. They stood together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, bound by love and scrambled eggs and the memory of a November morning when everything could have been lost, but was instead saved by a broken car and a choice to help. The universe has a strange sense of timing. It brings us to moments where our character is tested, where we must choose between self-preservation and service, between safety and sacrifice. And sometimes, when we choose right over easy, when we choose kindness over caution, the universe rewards us in ways we never expected. Marcus had helped a stranger, and that stranger had saved his family. He'd fixed a car, and that simple act had fixed his entire life. Not because the universe was fair or just or logical, but because sometimes, just sometimes, goodness attracts goodness like gravity. On Emma's first day of college, Marcus helped her move into her dorm room. As he was leaving, she grabbed his hand. Daddy, if you hadn't stopped to help Judge Mitchell that day, where do you think I'd be now? With your mother, probably. Living a different life. A life with more money, better opportunities, private schools. Maybe. But not a life with you. Not mornings with dying walrus songs and badly made cookies, and a dad who taught me that character matters more than cash. She squeezed his hand. I'd choose this life every time. Every single time. Marcus drove home alone that evening, the car feeling emptier than it ever had. But his heart felt full. fuller than it had any right to be. He'd been a poor single dad who'd helped a stranded woman, not knowing she was the judge who held his fate. That choice had changed everything. Had proven that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop when you should keep going, help when you should protect yourself, choose kindness when the world tells you to choose survival. The most important battles aren't always won with weapons or wealth or power. Sometimes they're won with character, with integrity, with the simple, revolutionary act of caring about someone else more than you care about yourself. Marcus had won his battle not in spite of his poverty, but because his poverty had never defined him. What defined him was his choice to help, even when helping might cost him everything. And in the end, that choice had given him everything that mattered. His daughter, his dignity, his proof that goodness still counted for something in a world that often suggested it didn't. Poor single dad helped a stranded woman, not knowing she was the judge who held his fate. It sounded like a fairy tale, but it was real. It had happened, and it had proven that sometimes, just sometimes, being good is enough. Being good is perfect.